From the depths of slumber as I ascend the spiral stairway of wakefulness, I will whisper, God, God, God. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast of nightly separation from thee, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. No matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind will ever keep turning on thee. And in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. When boisterous storms of trials shriek, and when worries howl at me, I will drown their noises, loudly chanting, God, God, God. When my mind weaves dreams with threads of memories, on that magic cloth will I emboss, God, God, God. Every night in time of deepest sleep, when my peace dreams and calls joy, joy, my joy comes singing evermore, God, God, God. In waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any, God, 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 God.
Morning.
Good morning.
These readings are from the book Rays of the One Light, weekly readings from the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's reading, Reincarnation, the Spiral Staircase. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the book of Revelation, chapter 3, Jesus Christ tells us, "Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out." There is a difference between church dogmas, which are based on reasoned deductions from scriptural statements, and the pronouncement of wisdom, which are based on the inner realization of scriptural truths. Reason, like a train, can only follow already existing tracks of human experience. Human memory, being short, is seldom able to cross back over the threshold of a person's present existence. Biblical references to previous lifetimes on earth are overlooked in the deductive process, and we find them therefore excluded from the body of official dogma. Nevertheless, such references exist. The Bible itself presents them, as does Jesus in this passage, not as abstract teachings, but as direct personal perception of truth. In the same way, Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, silences Arjuna's reasonable doubts on the subject, not by reasoned argument, but by the frank statement contained in the 4th chapter of that great scripture. "Arjuna, you and I have passed through many births. I know them all, though you, O chastiser of foes, recall them not." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om,
Om. Buddy?
Ready.
How is everyone?
Awake and ready.
For those who don't know us, I'm Nayaswami Daiva, and this is my wife, Nayaswami Galamata, and it's our blessing and pleasure to be here with you all this morning. Yogananda said, as we mentioned earlier, the time for knowing God has come. Not the time for talking about God, not the time for speculating about God, but the time for actually living in the divine presence. You know, this has been the quest of religionists of all ages, and it's been the quest, in fact, of all souls since the beginning of time. Because what we really are looking for, every one of us, is we're looking for the joy and the love and the wholeness that is our own nature. We're trying to reclaim that which already exists for us. And we look outward time and time and time again, and we try and find a lasting fulfillment that is... Yogananda defined God, interestingly, as ever-existing. So far, so good. Ever-conscious. So no point in all of creation is God's consciousness not present. Ever-new joy. Ever-conscious, ever-existing, ever-new joy. And isn't that what we're all seeking? We're looking for that which is endlessly joyful, but never, never the same. There's the story of the comic who told a joke, and everybody, it was a very funny joke, and everybody laughed, and so he told it again, and it was a stand-up comic, and he told it again, and everybody laughed, but it was a little bit less loud, and then he stood there for a moment, and then he told it again. And there was some embarrassed laughter, and then he told it again, and there was kind of a little tittering, and he told it one more time. It was absolutely silent. So clearly, you know, we don't want the same old joy over and over. But he had a very interesting point. He said, if you can't laugh at the same jokes over and over, why do you cry at the same tragedies over and over and over? And how many of us drag our tragedies along and define ourselves by those moments of our lives? Yogananda used to love to tell a story. You know, reincarnation. one of the gifts, this is the 70th year that the autobiography of a yogi has been in print. We'll be celebrating that at New Renaissance Bookshop on December 1st, an evening program. The influence of that book on the lives of those who have explored it and discovered treasures within it. So all of you are invited on that night. Again, it's at New Renaissance Bookshop. But it was that book that helped me understand and put the pieces of life and consciousness together. And one of the concepts in there that he explains so beautifully is the fact that reincarnation is just a given. And he describes it, and the more I've thought about it across these intervening decades, I realized that really reincarnation is not a whole lot different from going to sleep at night. Every night you just get out of your body, you put your body down. You're not aware of your senses, you're not aware of this world. But when you wake up in the morning, you put the body back on. And because it's just a short period of time, it's not quite as dramatic as death. For most of us, we don't forget what happened yesterday. Some of us, but most of us don't. But you wake up. We wake up as we were the day before, with a little bit of growth, a little bit of reprocessing, a little bit of reframing, and the ongoing experiment of where does happiness come from? Where does fulfillment come from? And we ask that question over and over and over and over and over until it becomes anguishingly monotonous. Yogananda liked to tell a story about the man who was born. He lived a life where he was poor, he had poor health, he had no abundance, no prosperity, and he died, and God came to him and said, "My son, what can I do for you?" And he said, "Oh God, next life I'd like to just be healthy." And so he was born like a Samson. He was born with this tremendously robust body, but he was still poor, and he died impoverished. And so God came to him and said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "God, next life I'd like to be born strong and healthy and wealthy." And so he was born, and he was strong and healthy, and he had plenty of abundance, but he was lonely. So when he died, God came to him and said, "What can I do for you, my son?" He said, "Well, I'd like to be strong, I'd like to be healthy, and I'd like to have a nice wife." And so he was given a beautiful wife. He was given a wife, but she was a shrew. And she just made his life hell. So when he died, he said, so the next time God came, it was healthy, strong, wealthy, and a nice wife. And so he was given a nice wife, along with all the other things. But she lived too long, and he got tired of her. And he ran off with the secretary. She stole all of his wealth, and he died. And, and you can see the trajectory of this on and on and on. We always think it's going to work out. We always think that our happiness is going to come from some kind of outer condition. And life after life after life, we seek what will satisfy us in external things which can never last and never give us back. There's a lot of reasons for the dream. Yogananda said, God created this dream to entertain and to educate. And there's plenty of entertainment to be had here and plenty of education to be had if we know how to look. And there's very important roles for us to play in this world, in this dream world. But he used to talk about not getting confused. It's like we're actors. We are part of God's consciousness. Our home, our reality is joy. It is love. It is power. It is wisdom. It is calmness and peace. It's also light and sound. Those are who we are, the fabric of the universe. And then we have roles to play, but it's a little like an actor on stage, getting shot and thinking he's really dead. We take so much to heart, this outer dream. And he said that awakening, the time for knowing God has come. Awakening in God doesn't mean we don't play our roles with enthusiasm. But if you're terrified of getting shot, how effective can you be in your role? If you're always terrified of what's going to happen in the script, how can you play your role effectively? And one of the things that he gave us, he said, "I give you these tools for self-realization. I give you the power of concentration. I give you the power of self-mastery and the mastery of life force. I give you the power of inner communion, and I give you the power to get rid of all those tendencies that keep calling you back. Tie those to devotion." And he said, "You will find God. You will find God." Devi and Jyotish, Nayaswami's Devi and Jyotish are the spiritual directors of Ananda globally. They are they inherited the mantle from Swami Kriyananda, and they go around the world and they carry this light into the lives of thousands and thousands of people. But Devi, a while back, was lamenting. She was saying to Jyotish in a very private conversation, I can share this because they shared it, okay? But it was a very private conversation, and she said, I just don't know if I'm going to get liberated, if I'm going to really reclaim the fullness of my oneness with God this life. I just don't know if I'm going to make it. And Jyotish very sternly looked at her and said, you should always have, you should always plan on becoming liberated. You should always plan on reclaiming your oneness with God in this life. And then, if you don't, you should have plan B. So Devi was telling this up in Seattle at Sunday service, and she spoke first, and she told the story of this, and she said, so we should all plan on making it. We should all plan on being Jivan Muktas in this life, and then we should always have plan B. And Jyotish stood up to speak, and he introduced himself. He said, I am plan B. God gives us, if we're sincere, and we want to fill our lives with God, He gives us specific tasks to do, services to provide, for the times when our eyes aren't closed in meditation. He said, we will find God, the Bible even says it, be still and know. Meditation, stillness, the only time we can really completely reclaim our oneness with God, because God is beyond form. We can't find it out there, but we can be reminded. We should do things important. When our eyes aren't closed, what do we do with our time? What do we do with ourselves? We can go out drinking, which works kind of against your yoga. You can go and just entertain yourself. All of us can just be entertained. Or we can be in service. What would the Master be doing? How would he be serving that light in service to the world, in service to others, to help them find and reclaim their happiness and joy and their wholeness? So Yogananda, he had the task of creating Self-Realization Fellowship and YSS. And, it was a global thing. It got shrunk down because of certain events in his life. But it was a massive movement that he started, and a massive organization. Not for the organization's sake, but for the amount of capacity to serve others. Swami Kriyananda, he was given Ananda Village and Ananda worldwide. And he spent his life persevering in service. And every day he got up and tried to find some way in which he could use his time to create a fabric of organizations, but again, organizations only because they make possible the capacity for that movement of consciousness and understanding and insight and support to move into the world. We've been given Ananda Portland and Ananda Laurelwood. It's interesting, we can tie, if we care to, we can tie the gifts that our masters have given us and God has given us with our own spiritual progress. There's a sweet story of a man who was praying at his altar. And he said, he was praying for God to show up, and the Lord showed up. And he said, I want you to go out and I want you to push on this boulder that's outside of your hut. There's an enormous boulder. And the man went out, and every day he spent his time pushing on that boulder. And 20 years later, God found him weeping at his altar. And he said, my son, what's wrong? My son, what's wrong? And the man said, for 20 years, every day I've spent my days pushing on the boulder like you asked me to, and it hasn't moved an inch. And God, with such sweetness and tenderness, said, I didn't ask you to move it. I asked you to push on it. Look at what's happened. I mean, there's the information of how we misinterpret what's being asked of us. But he said, look at what's happened for you. Look at what you've become through the process of doing what I asked. You become strong. You become patient. You've persevered. You've learned the strength of character. Everything that I wanted for you was in that effort. There's a story, the story of a great yogi. in Tibet. His name was Milarepa, and he's really known as one of the greatest yogis that Tibetan Buddhism ever put out, ever came up. He was a village man, a little Tibetan man from a small village. And other villagers came and basically destroyed his village and his family's capacity to take care of themselves. They robbed them blind, basically. And he was so incensed that he went off and he studied and he learned black magic. And he created tremendous pain and suffering on those that had violated the family, and created tremendous bad karma. And one day, after having been involved in this for a long time, he was sitting and meditating, and he realized what he had put in motion. And he was mortified, and he went looking for some way of cleaning up this karma, some way of redemption. And he ended up at the feet of a great spiritual teacher, Marpa, and he started to try and study. But Marpa said, "I will not teach you until you do something for me." He said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "I want you to go and by hand, with no help, I want you to build this enormous tower over here." And he pointed to a hill. And so Milarepa spent years building this tower. And he finally got it completed. And there were specifications on what it was supposed to be and everything. He got it completed. He went back to Marpa and he said, "I'm done." And Marpa went out and looked and said, "That's not what I asked you to build." And he had him take it all the way down and build it on another hillside. Took him how long to tear it down, and then years to build it again. He built it again, and he went over and said, "I've done it. I'm ready for your teachings." And Marpa came out and said, "That's not where I told you to build it." He said, "You must have been drunk when you asked me. You must not have heard right." So again, he tore it down. And one more time, think about this. This is not a small thing. This is years of toiling and then being told, "No, that's not right." The things that it takes to purify us, the things that it takes to undo the momentum that we've put. If we want to be free in God, if we want to reclaim our souls, we have to balance out, allow to have balanced out all of those negativities, all those karmas, all those things. So once again, anywhere along the line, he could have said, "I don't need this. I can live a better life. I don't need to have this." But he was wise enough to know that karma doesn't go away. He was wise enough to know that the gift of his guru, the things that his guru gave him to do, the services, were the pathway to what he was seeking. Just as for us, building this temple, building Ananda Laurelwood, building the school out here, serving that light at the very center of it is our pathway to freedom. It's the gift we've been given to become channels for that light from God through these masters, through Swami Kriyananda, into this world in blessing. So he built it one more time. But even then, his trials weren't over. He was there in the ashram, and people came and were taught and went away, and still his guru refused to give him the initiations. He even went and got the sympathy of his guru's wife, and she sent him off to another master, and he learned the initiations there, but nothing changed for him. Again, we can't circumvent, if we're sincere, we can't circumvent the pathway that brings us to God. It takes perseverance. It takes sincerity. The purification of the soul, the purification of our nature takes time and effort. But in every single case, Swami Kriyananda said, the only thing in the world that ever will satisfy and ever has satisfied is finding God. He said, I've never yet met a saint who came back and said, "Gosh, that wasn't worth it. I should have been a plumber." But every one of us, every other thing we try, we go, "Well, that wasn't quite it." There's a beautiful song that's a part of our service this morning. It's next. And it says, "Through many lives, I've drunk the cup of sweetness, of laughter. No man can tell the pleasures I have known. Through many lives, I've drunk the cup of sorrow. No man can know the bitter tears I've shed. Life after life after life, we reach for wholeness. Even in, for many of us, we feel like we've probably lived a handful of lives just in this body, in this time. And each time we keep reaching the same point, if we try and find the wholeness from those outer things, the same point where we just are holding an empty bag. But if we fill up inside, if we fill up with God first, then that joy and that light overflows our souls and fills everything that we touch. And that is the completion and the goal of life. There's a really cute little bumper sticker that was out for many years. It was kind of the bumper sticker wars, and it was, there was kind of conventional approach to Christianity and the evolutionists and stuff back and forth, and it had the fish, and then somebody put the fish on legs, and then somebody had the fish upside down, and back and forth. But then there was one that said, born again Christian, and again, and again, and again. Referring to reincarnation. And I saw a couple of cute little cartoons when I was looking around this morning, and one of them had a little boy standing with his grandfather, and he's looking up at his grandfather and he says, when I was your age, I didn't believe in reincarnation either. And then the protesters out there, with their signs that say, don't keep making the same mistake, just say no to reincarnation. If we want wholeness, if we really want the fulfillment of what our souls call for, we're all the same at this level. And the greatest joy, the greatest adventure, I was a little apprehensive of what the search for God might look like. But when I came to Ananda, I came because I was sincere 30 some years ago. I came because I couldn't stand the thought of my life just being pleasant, just being nice. I wanted fulfillment that lasted. I didn't want to come to the end of this life and feel like one more time I was holding an empty bag. And the adventure of life didn't even begin, I realized, until I had started that quest. It's the greatest story ever any of us will ever live. And the greatest joy and the friendships we develop and the beauty that comes, the building of this temple as it is, the development of the community, the development of the school across decades, the development of Laurelwood, and the thousands of people that come and are touched and uplifted and reminded of their own wholeness because of those efforts. It's the greatest gift. This is from Whispers from Eternity. It's number 201. And the way we do it is we remember God in the moments. We remember as that first beautiful song this morning. God, God, God. I take this sacred vow. Never will I lower my love's gaze below the eyebrow, the point of divine contact, the eyebrow horizon of my constant thoughts of God. Never will I turn my uplifted inner sight away from thee. Never will I let my mind dwell on anything that reminds me not of thee. I will disdain the nightmare of ignorant behavior. I will court all dreams of noble achievement, those of love and kindness and understanding, for they are thy dreams. Though I dream many dreams wakefully, I will ever think of thee in the sacred fire of constant remembrance, kept ever alight on my soul's altar. I will behold thy presence with the watchful eyes of devotional love. Thy grace has shown me that the dualities of health and sickness, life and death, joy and sorrow are but passing fantasies. I am finished with those eternally self-canceling delusions. I am persuaded at last that there is but one abiding reality, thy eternal, ever conscious, ever new, ever thrilling, infinite bliss.
Swami Kriyananda. Through many lives I've drunk the cup of laughter. No man could tell the pleasures I have known. The stars in the endless sky, if one could count, would come to billions. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Through many lives I've drunk the cup of sorrow. No man could tell the bitter tears I've shed. The drops in the endless sea, if one could count, would come to billions. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Through countless lives I've sought your cup of sweetness, found other cups, yet thirsted evermore. The streams in the hills of time all found their way into a desert. Every noon of bright fulfillment, ere many hours did sink to evening gloom. Every noon of bright fulfillment, ere many hours did sink to evening gloom. I long for you in summer and in winter, only for you my heart thirsts day and night. I've learned that the sweetest songs ears ever heard were but your echo. Lord, at last, fill me completely, for nevermore I'd wander far from you. Lord, at last, fill me completely, for nevermore I'd wander far from